Hey guys, welcome back to Noah's MMA. I'm Noah and welcome to the channel. Today I thought we'd react to UFC 296. We're not going to go over every single fight, but let's go over some of the most exciting ones, surprising ones, and ones that are going to affect the future for MMA. So right off the bat, let's talk about Tony Ferguson versus Paddypimblett. I thought that Tony looked okay. The thing is that in this day and age, the fighting has evolved so much. Fighters are so much better than they were back in the day of, GSP or Anderson Silva. There's so much more knowledge out there now. There's so much stuff that has changed since then. I mean, there's literally submissions in jiu-jitsu that didn't even exist back in 2008. Well, they did exist, but they weren't being used. Tony's an extremely good grappler. He was a 10th Planet guy. He's a black belt under Eddie Bravo. Eddie used to tell stories of him just training until they turned the light off. I mean, this guy is an absolute dog. Really a true martial artist. He's had a lot of issues, mental health issues, with some domestic violence in his home that he was a part of. He's had lots of manic episodes where he thought people were coming to get him, this and that. So, not unlike Sean Strickland, this guy kind of uses martial arts for therapy for him, for his traumas. So, anyways, he performed sort of the way I thought. I thought he might have a little bit more in him after the David Goggins Hell Week thing, which, by the way, was hilarious. Seeing David Goggins yell at him in the corner. David Goggins did his best, and I'm sure he got something from that Hell Week, but what he really needs is more training partners. He needs to be training consistently with top level guys, which isn't something he does or has done historically. During his 12 fight win streak, he didn't even have a school that he was consistently training at. He did a lot of solo training and he did a lot of strength and conditioning, and he obviously is a really good grappler, but he wasn't practicing it with others as much as you would think he would. So to put it in perspective, Paddypimblett is good, but it wasn't a great showing for Paddy. I mean, it was pretty decent. He didn't finish him, but he absolutely dominated most of the fight. He dropped Tony, and it wasn't sad to see for Tony because what we learned about him during this fight was that he really does it for the love of it, and again, he does it as a form of therapy. And I think that's great. I mean, that's why I do martial arts, and I think that's why a lot of us do. But anyways, so he lost against Paddy. It was a decision loss, and a lot of people are saying that he should he should retire, he should stop. But it's like when you look at it from the perspective of he's doing something that he loves, whatever. I mean, I think his record's 26 and like 10 or something like that. But regardless, to conclude, what I'm saying about that fight, it was a great fight. And I mean, Paddy is a stand-up dude. I did notice that during this week, he was a little bit reserved. Kind of wondered if there was something going on with him behind the scenes. He seemed really quiet, didn't have that sort of outgoing personality and creativity with his words that he usually does. I think at the end of the day, he really respected Tony Ferguson, and he didn't want to like beat him up bad because everyone's kind of simping on Tony right now, and he didn't want to be part of that. So regardless, where does Paddy go from here? Honestly, I think Paddy is ready for a top 15 opponent. I think he absolutely needs to be thrown into the deep end, and he's undefeated in the UFC. I just think it's time for him to really be tested. So the question is, who is he going to be tested against? Personally, I'd like to see him fight a guy like Bobby Green, maybe. I think Bobby Green is number 8 right now. That would be a top 10, but I do think that would be a good matchup stylistically. They're both sort of good everywhere. They're not like spectacular in one area, although Bobby is pretty sharp on the feet. Bobby Green's coming off, I think, a loss, but before that he beat Tony Ferguson, so there's some parallel there with Paddy. Moving on, let's talk about Shavkat Rakhmonov versus Wonderboy Thompson. It was sad to see Wonderboy get choked out for the first time ever in his career after he was walked out by Tenacious D. Jack Black, and that was pretty funny. Anyways, I was surprised that Rachmanov chose to grapple because he is a good striker. But I guess he was going in that fight with some sort of injury, so it was actually a choice. And being the first person to submit Wonder Boy was a feather in his cap. Moving on to Pantoja versus Royval, I kind of saw that coming. That was actually part of one of my picks that I made. I made like 5 picks and 4 of them came through. The one bet that I made that I got wrong was Colby versus Leon, which is what I really want to get to now. Colby versus Leon was it was a weird fight. Colby didn't seem to really get his groove going until like the 3rd round. I scored it 48-47. I feel like Colby won round 3 and 5. Maybe not, but that's pretty generous for him. It just seemed like Colby wasn't trying the first couple rounds, and even Joe and DC and John were talking about how it seemed like a completely different fighter. So basically, Edwards did a great job. Colby was just throwing sort of like pop shots. He wasn't really winding up. He wasn't reckless like he often is. In the whole fight, he shot 10 takedowns and got 2. Leon shot 3 takedowns and got 2. That was pretty impressive for Leon to take down Colby. Colby, after the fight, talked about how he had a lot of ring rust and it was kind of weird for him to be back in the cage. And Leon, again, did a great job. He did just enough. So let's just talk about for a second the mindsets of both fighters going in. Colby came off a win from Masvidal, which was like a year and a half ago, which he looked very dominant in. But it's got to be completely different from when all the lights are on you and he had Donald Trump there supporting him. So the first round, it was really close, but it seemed like Leon got the better of the exchanges. Same thing in the second round. They were both doing pretty well. They weren't really putting out, it seemed like, maximal effort, but at the same time, everything's on the line, and at the highest level, it looks like a chess match. It doesn't often come with all the oohs and the ahs and the big punches and the big throws, although, a majority of the time it does. But in certain cases, the level of the fighters are on such an even playing field that when they get together, there just aren't as much fireworks. So the third round is when it got a little more lively and interesting. This is when they both started shooting takedowns. Colby started the takedowns first, and Leon got one in the same round. Obviously, Colby's really good at wrestling, so he just popped right back up. But so did Leon, and Leon actually shot a couple submissions. The total control time for the fighters was Leon had about a minute and a half, and Colby had more like 5 minutes, but that was only in the 5th round when he was just kind of holding on and doing those little rabbit punches. So 3, 4, and 5 are really the ones you'd want to look at. But personally, I had it 48-47. I think Leon won 1, 2, and 4, and Colby, 1, 3, and 5. I think 3, maybe it could have gone either way. The last round was really interesting because it was sort of when Colby started to really come alive. He definitely won the last round. He ended up on top, punching Leon, but it's not like they were doing, too much damage. But it was in the 5th round when we really started to see Colby become the Colby that we normally see. A little more reckless, more volume, a different sort of style, a little more aggressive. And at the end of the fight, Colby seemed to think he won, which I want to talk about for a second. I think that when you're in the heat of the fight, it's got to be pretty hard to really score the fight and know who's really winning. I think at the end, probably fighters think about, how tired they are and how much pain they're in. They probably think about how many times they feel like they got hit, and that could be a big determining factor when a fighter determines whether or not he thinks he won or not. I don't really know what happened after the fight, but it seemed like Leon's coach kind of got into it with Colby. This was during Leon's speech. It seemed like Colby was basically just giving attitude, and I'm not completely sure, but it seemed like the coach maybe flipped off Colby or something like that. But when it's all said and done, Leon won, and I think if Colby rewatches the fight, he'll probably feel the same way deep down. Question is, where does Colby go from here? I was a little perplexed by his idea of fighting Stephen Wonderboy Thompson. However, they're both coming off losses. But Stephen Wonderboy Thompson did get finished, and he's not as highly ranked as Colby is. I think Colby probably sees it as an opportunity for him to get a win and then possibly make his way back to a title shot. I mean, the guy's 35 and, DC was winning championships at 40. All in all, it was a really good card. It kind of sucked not to see Ian Garry fight. When it comes to all that stuff with him and his wife and all that stuff that's going on in the media right now, I personally think it's dumb. I think there's no point for it. As your stardom rises, there's more eyeballs on you and people trying to find dirt on you. And if the worst thing is that you took your wife's last name and you happen to co-parent the kid that your wife has with her ex-husband, that's really not that bad. I'm sure it's in the name of the kids. I'm sure that the relationship between the ex-wife and the ex-husband is completely platonic. I heard somewhere that he was the nutritionist of Ian Garry. So now let's jump into the Sean Strickland and Dricus du Plessis scuffle. I'm under the impression that that was staged. I truly think that Dana White, he's a smart guy and he knows how to market. So the fact that he would put them right beside each other or right in front of each other, I think Dana knew this, and I think this was completely done by the brass, and that they all knew this was going to happen. I mean, if you really rewatch it, it seemed kind of quick that they jumped to having the brawl, to have the throws punched. It seemed like 1 minute they were cool and the next minute they weren't. This isn't really something that Sean has ever done. I think he would have been smart enough to do something afterwards where the cameras weren't right on him. And everyone immediately jumped in. There was only enough for him to get 4 or 5 punches. They did seem like kind of decent punches, but I just think it was staged. I think they do this sort of thing all the time, and good for them. They can use that footage to promote the fight. And it is also interesting how good of a shot and good of an angle they got. Now, granted, they were at the UFC fight and there's cameras everywhere, but it did seem like the whole thing was staged. When it came to the press conference between the two, I would say that Sean Strickland did really well at the press conference. He played on the whole joke about the coach being in a relationship with Dricus. I think Dricus's comment was a little below the belt, going to his childhood trauma. There's so many things you could make fun of Sean Strickland for. You can make fun of the way he looks, the way he dresses, the things he's done in the past, but to prod at someone's trauma is a little below the belt. Again, it could be like Colbycovington with Leon's dad, the comment he made about his dead dad. It could just be to really try to get under his skin. And obviously Dricus was able to do that. He hit a nerve with Sean, and man, that's going to be a crazy fight to watch. It's really my breakdown and reaction of UFC 296. I thought it was an awesome card. I'd like to know what you guys thought. Drop a comment, a like, and a subscribe, and talk to you guys next week. Peace.